Welcome to the Lovers Lounge podcast, where we talk to experts and other guests on topics related to love, relationships, and sex. I am your host, Tina Love, and on this episode, we're going to be talking with Veronica Grant. Now, get this. Veronica is a podcast host and a love coach for successful women who feel like they have it all except they haven't found love. She helps them find it. So we're going to be hearing from her and her story and finding out what she does and how everything happened for her, how she found love. Welcome, Veronica, to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I know. I am so excited to have you. So, wow, I've been listening to your story, and it is so very interesting. And I just love your podcast. You are doing some pretty spectacular, life-changing things for women who are looking for love in this, as you quote, swipe right, swipe left world. So let's dive right into this conversation, shall we? You've gone through a lot, and you share your story on your podcast about how at a very early age, like 11, I think you even said, you knew that you wanted to be in love. I think part of it too was your sister falling in love or marrying her college sweetheart, and so you kind of knew what you wanted right away. Is that right?
Yeah. I was very aware of relationships and marriage, and my sister is she's about 7 years older than me, and so at about 11 years old, she would have been 18, 19 or so, and I think she met her now husband fairly early on, and I was just like, yes, that's what I want. I think I could also probably psychoanalyze myself a little bit more, and I probably also wanted that kind of relationship because I felt, and we can talk about this a little bit more, but I felt not necessarily seen or heard by my parents, especially my mom, in the way that I wanted to. And so I think I wanted like that person, that rock to be, to be fully seen with, to be fully with. And obviously an 11-year-old, I probably wasn't able to articulate that or like consciously be aware. But I was never the kind of person like, oh, I'm young, I'm just living it up or whatever. Like I remember even as early as high school, dating someone and be like, I wonder if we'll get married. I wonder if this is the person.
Isn't that something? It's something how as little girls, like I don't know what it is about us, because I'm looking at my niece now. She's 5 years old, and I don't know. I guess we just see, like you said, mom and dad, we see relationships, and we just kind of know, like, well, I just want my Prince Charming, or you know what I'm saying? And we just know, like, at a very early age, like we're playing wedding or playing, as though we're getting married, or our Barbie dolls are with Barbie and Ken, and they're married. And we're just, we just kind of know in our minds, like, this is where we ultimately want to be. It's so funny. Like, we just come here. Yeah, knowing that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that's social conditioning too. From things like Barbie and Ken or Disney shows or whatever. It's so ingrained that, when you grow up, little girls grow up and they get married and they have kids, and not that there's anything wrong with that life path.
Right.
It's just that when we're little, we're like, oh yeah, that's what we do. That's what we're supposed to want.
Yeah.
Rather than being like, is this really what I want?
It's funny. I just got a flashback when I have a son, and he was about 8 years old. And I can remember one of my friends had two daughters, and one of them was the same age as my son, or maybe a year younger. And she was getting her hair done, and my son was in the area, the same salon. He was getting some services done or something. And the little girl said to my son, "You're going to be my husband." And my son just kind of looked like, okay. It was so funny. But it's so funny. Even way back then, at 7 years old, she was sitting there and she just told him, "You're going to be my husband." So I thought that was so funny. Yeah. Well, and
that is funny.
yeah, the thing is too, you knew that you wanted a Jewish Boy, so that was something too. Like you had in your mind, not only were you going to try to get a college sweetheart and get married, but he had to be Jewish. And so tell me a little bit about that. Like,
Yeah. So, I grew up Jewish, I was raised Jewish, and so I wanted, and I wasn't even, a lot of Jewish parents, particularly mothers, put a lot of pressure on their children to marry someone Jewish, to, I don't know, keep the tribe alive or whatever. And I never had that pressure from my parents. In fact, my dad's not even Jewish. Um, but for me, it was really important because I remember feeling like I always kind of got left out on some of the Jewish holiday traditions. We didn't do them as much as I think we normally would have had I had a two Jewish parent home because, um, we kind of did some Christmas stuff and we did some Jewish stuff growing up. And I felt like it was almost kind of like half-assing both
yeah,
rather than being able to, do it more fully. And it just looked fun. And I was jealous of my friends that, right, that did all that
had
kind of stuff. And what's interesting is I do get a lot of questions, not, I mean, most of my clients aren't Jewish, but usually religion comes up. Not, I shouldn't say usually, but a lot of times religion comes up and like, you have to marry someone or have to be with someone in the same religion or the same, with the same like values or whatever. And what I discovered in my life is I was looking so hard for a Jewish person, which, statistically like really narrows down the pool, which isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world. But for me, what I realized going through my various relationships and experiences that it was more important for me to marry someone who would, or not that even just to marry someone, just to be with someone who, valued that I valued Judaism and was also at least somewhat interested in it. Not that like I wanted them to convert or anything, because I had dated someone Jewish when I was living in Charleston, South Carolina, and he he grew up totally like removed from, doing anything actively Jewish. And so, I would drag him to Shabbat dinners or like various like,
right.
other functions or holidays. And like he might as well have just not been Jewish, right?
Yeah.
He had no idea what's going on, which is fine. And it was still like the heavy labor was still all on me to bring that into the relationship. Whereas I dated other guys who were not Jewish, but they were interested in it. They wanted to learn more. They wanted to experience it. And so even though like it was still me, the one sharing it and talking about it first, there was a little bit more of that equal footing and kind of felt like a little bit more
Yeah.
back and forth. So after those two experiences, that's when I was like, okay, yeah, like it would probably be easier to marry someone Jewish, especially with having kids. It would just be a little bit easier. However, for me, I'm much more interested now in being with someone who values it and is interested in it and not necessarily, they don't necessarily have to share the same faith because at the end of the day, like whether or not someone is Jewish or not just kind of becomes a label.
All right. Yeah.
and it doesn't really matter. And obviously this applies, I think, not just to people who are Jewish, but to anyone who is, a practicing member of their faith or whatever spiritual background they come from. I think it's less important that, they marry someone or end up with someone of the same. And it's more about, is there a mutual respect? Is there a
Yes.
value
Yes.
and an interest in it? And what I will say is I did end up marrying someone Jewish. But what's funny is I came from a totally different sect of Judaism. So I came from Reform Judaism, which is very liberal,
Mm-hmm.
very open. It's not super religious or strict. There aren't like a bunch of rules. And my husband came from Orthodox
I
Judaism,
see.
where there's lots of rules, like the women dress certain ways and they don't drive on Shabbat or use electricity.
Yeah.
and so that was actually way more of a challenge than anyone that I dated previously,
Yeah.
Jewish or not. So even if someone has the quote unquote same label as you, does not mean it's going to be easy or that you're automatically on the same page.
Yeah, yeah.
At
All
the end of the
right.
day, relationships are deeper and are more complex than that.
Yeah. All right. And we're going to talk about, because your husband is Stevie, and we're going to
Yes.
ultimately talk about Stevie. We're going to get there. That was going to be my next question, was Stevie Jewish? But anyway, we're going to talk about Stevie. But before we do, I want to walk down this little memory lane here about you, and your pursuit, for the love relationship, which you now have. Um, but you broke a few guys' hearts along the way. I mean, it sounds like, you had a special person in high school, and then you went away to college, and you had a really special person in college. Like, you guys were really good friends. But it didn't work out. Can you tell the audience a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, like we said earlier in our conversation, I always wanted to be in this serious relationship. I was never interested in something casual or like, oh, let's see where this goes. And when I got to college, I was a woman on a mission. Like, I really, really wanted to meet my college sweetheart. I wanted to be just like what my sister did.
Yeah.
And probably, gosh, within the first month of first year, I met this guy. I won't use his name, to protect his privacy. Not that,
Yes, of course.
I mean, there's
Mhm.
a million people in the world, but whatever. And we just became instantly really, really, really good friends. And he was like oh my gosh, we were just constantly texting each other and hanging out, and he could make me laugh like nobody else could. And um, we had all these like inside jokes, and the relationship was always 100% platonic, at least on my end. I don't know when he, developed feelings for me, but he never said anything about us end of junior year. So,
Yeah.
you know, almost 3 years of friendship. And like, oh, I told her about my guy problems, and then he was the one I'd always cry to, and I would inevitably get disappointed or broken up with or whatever by the people that I was dating. And so towards the end of junior year of college, he confessed his love for me,
Right.
and he really wanted to pursue a relationship. And I was like totally freaked out. I was just like, what? Whoa, like
Yeah.
this is a lot. And so I needed space just to like figure it out. And then ultimately I was like, no, I don't really see us, you know, being able to, you know, have that kind of relationship. And of course he was devastated. And that was right before school let out for the summer. So we went away to our own summer things. We didn't talk at that point. I guess he needed space. We just weren't really friends anymore. And we came back in the fall, and I thought we could be friends again, but I was mistaken. And why I decided to change my mind, I don't know. It could have been just because I really missed our friendship. I mean, he really was a big part of my life at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Um, I think also it had to do with the fact that, like, I mean, gosh, the story was so good. Had it
Yeah.
worked out, like, it would have been an amazing love story and a story for the ages, and my kids, my grandkids, and my great grandkids. We
Right.
talked about this like epic like love story of
Getting
between me and
away
this
and coming
guy.
back. Yeah.
So totally. So like I was like, I think I was just in love with like the idea of it, and I was in love with the story. And I was like, well, this I really wanted to meet someone in college, and you know, this person, like, we're gonna get married, like, if we date, like, he will marry me. And so I don't know if I convinced myself or what, but I eventually was like, okay, yeah, I wanna give it a go. And I think that was probably mid fall, so mid first semester of our last year in school.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, like, it was really wonderful because, again, he was like my best friend. So of course we had a ton of fun together and good laughs and everything. And the entire time there was just no physical chemistry, at least at my end. Like, I
Oh.
remember walking home from parties or going out and thinking of like, okay, what excuse can I have tonight to like not have sex?
Oh.
And so once then the school year ended and things were still moving along and seemed serious, um, despite, not really having that physical chemistry or physical connection. And so ultimately, you know, I broke up with him,
Yeah.
and he, of course, hated me for it. And we're not even today, like, we're not really friends. We've seen each
Yeah.
other at a few weddings from college friends, but
Right.
for the most part, like, we haven't really spoken, or
Yeah. Well, I
we moved completely on. But what was so fascinating about that relationship is, I think ultimately he probably wasn't the right person for me. But I think what is interesting is what he was offering me and able to offer me was what I wanted so desperately bad.
yeah.
And what I find from a lot of my clients and women who talk to me about, always attracting emotionally unavailable partners and being really frustrated about that. Well, in a lot of ways, like attracts like. And so if you're attracting a lot of partners who are emotionally unavailable, there's a really good chance that you're emotionally unavailable too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a really good example of what can happen. So my entire experience, or just about my entire experience up until that point, had been attracting all these people who, didn't really want a relationship,
Right.
or just thought it was like friends with benefits, or it was just on their terms, or like whatever, right? So all these people that weren't emotionally available. And ultimately, I wasn't emotionally available too, because I didn't really have any idea of how to connect deeply with someone. And in fact, I really only had the ability to connect physically with people. I said, okay, maybe if I spend the night, or if we sleep together, or if we do this, or make out, whatever, then we can build that emotional connection, which is the thing that I really wanted. Obviously, it doesn't work like that, but ultimately, I was emotionally available, so not really surprising. That's what I attracted. And then here comes along this guy who was a really great friend of mine, but also was able to, provide emotionally exactly what I wanted. But because I was the one who was emotionally unavailable,
Okay.
I wasn't really available for and or able to receive what he was, willing and able to give.
Right.
And so that, I think, created some of like the shutdown, and maybe it was part of like the lack of physical intimacy, because it was hard for me to just to get into the emotional intimacy that he was able to provide. I don't know. But my point is that this happens a lot. My clients who attract emotionally unavailable partners over and over again will often also attract someone who's really great and someone
Yeah.
who does have a lot of emotional availability, but they're not able to receive it because ultimately they're emotionally unavailable as well,
Wow.
but may not realize it.
Yeah. So really, the saying, we attract who we are. I guess there's kind of, and listening to you, there may be some truth to that. I mean, you're saying that we kind of mirror, like how we are, kind of mirrors, this person that we ultimately, attract or that navigates toward us. It's kind of like, what we put out there is actually that energy that we kind of get back. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it does happen like that. I don't necessarily think it's like super or as straightforward all the time, because sometimes someone, for example, who is a people pleaser, let's say, and a lot of women are people pleasers because that's a lot of how we're socially conditioned, to please and to not rock the boat and whatnot. And so, just because you're a people pleaser doesn't necessarily mean you're going to attract another people pleaser,
Okay. Okay.
but you might attract someone who is complementary to that. So, for example,
Overly accommodating, maybe.
yeah, like if you're a people pleaser, there's a really good chance you might attract someone who's super controlling, or even
Okay.
like someone who has like narcissistic personality disorder,
Ah,
or just narcissistic tendencies, I should say. Because if you think about it, like if you're a people pleaser, that means I get like if I was a people pleaser, that means I get my worth and my sense of self and my sense of confidence from pleasing other people.
I see.
And so a narcissist, or someone with narcissistic tendencies, or even controlling tendencies, they get their confidence and self of worth by having other people,
Do it for them.
you
Yeah.
know, revolve their life around them. And
Yes.
so it's
Okay.
kind of like a match made in heaven. So
Ah,
it's not always that you'll attract exactly what you put out there. It could be for sure, but it also could be you're attracting something that's complementary to what you're putting out there.
yes. Okay.
And it may not be exactly what you want or
So,
what you're looking for.
yeah, yeah. And then when you just kind of clamp together and it's like this beautiful
Yeah.
dance, you guys just
Yeah.
begin. Yeah. Okay.
Totally.
All right. So after him and that didn't work out, and then you are like pretty ambitious, or you've always have been anyway, from what I can tell.
Yeah.
You love traveling, and I mean, wow, traveling. I mean, you had an interest to work in the Middle East, and you ultimately, went to Jerusalem for a while. And I was like, wow, for you to do that fresh out of college, that took a lot of courage. So hats off to you for that. Um, but you met someone in the Middle East. Had relationships, and those kind of that didn't really work. What would you say? What did you think? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say those. So I had two relationships back to back,
Yeah.
and when I was in grad school there, and I think especially that second relationship really was like the low point. I would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I would say that was probably overall. No, that's not true. Both of those relationships really broke my heart. In just like a bazillion pieces. But the similarity between the two of them was that, I knew deep down, especially the second person, but really both, but definitely the second, that I was way more invested in the relationship and I had much stronger feelings for them than they did for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't care. Well, I cared, but I didn't really care because I thought that, you know, if we kept dating, then their feelings would change and they would see how awesome I am and they wouldn't, want their life to be without me. And so the first relationship, we were dating, he was an American and he was moving back to the US
Right.
the following summer, but I had another year of grad school. So obviously I wasn't moving back. And so I just thought, okay, maybe he'll, maybe once we get to like April or so, we'll talk about the future of our relationship and just see. I'm not saying we should stay together, but we've been dating for a little bit, and I think maybe it's worth a conversation. But in his mind, it was always it was
He
always going to
knew.
be a
Yeah.
temporary relationship,
Yeah.
until he left. And for me, like I just felt like you're just like I'm just like a tire, and you're done with the tire, and then you just put it back on the shelf. And so that really hurt. I just kind of felt like a little bit. I don't know if used is the right word, but I just felt really kind of played maybe.
Yeah.
And it was just really a lack of communication because we could have communicated this early on and maybe would have been able to agree on something, but at least there would have been an expectation that was clearly said rather than just assumed. And we had different assumptions
Right.
from, each of the two, the two of us in the relationship.
Your
And then,
expectations. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And then, so he went away in June, and then I actually went away myself. I got my master's in Middle East Studies from Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and part of that requirement required a certain Arabic proficiency test or a skill level. And I thought that the Arabic program was not very good there, so I decided to go to Syria, and I spent a summer doing Arabic intensive and living with a family there. And I came back, and I was interning with it's an organization called B'Tselem, which is basically a human rights organization that's mostly Israeli, whatever, owned and operated, but they focus a lot on Palestinian rights. And so I was interning there, and I met someone there who was also Jewish, and he was also like super liberal and wasn't like pro-Zionist, which is very rare in the Jewish community.
Yeah.
And so for me, like I was like, oh my God,
You
like this is
really
like
thought.
my,
Yes. You really thought
I,
that was it.
yeah, I was like, this is it. Like, and I just again, I mean, he was great. Don't get me wrong, he's a great person, but like I fell in love with the idea of him rather than him himself.
Yeah.
And that relationship would never even got as a. I mean, at least my last relationship, the one previous, like we had some boundaries and it was official. Like, yes, we were together. But this guy, like, he was like, oh, I don't like to put boundaries on it or labels, and I just
Okay.
pretended
Yeah.
to
One
be
of
okay
those.
with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And I just kept going for it, even though like I could feel and I knew that like he was slipping away and wasn't as interested. I just kept going for it and going for it and going for it. And that relationship was really tumultuous because I always, I say the phrase, my emotion du jour, like my emotion of the day was pretty much based on like whether or not we had plans scheduled, was based on whether or not, he was texting or seemed to be into me,
Yeah.
that week or
Yeah.
that day.
Yeah.
And that's just a really exhausting
To
way to
be. I
live.
know.
And
Gosh.
it's,
Yes.
it's, it's awful. And I really, I mean, I don't regret anything because I think that relationship, because it brought me to my knees, is really what got me to where I am today, or the catalyst. But at the same time, like, I just regret that I didn't spend more time with friends from grad school or doing little
Yeah.
trips, because we're like living abroad. Like, it's cool, like, we'll see things and whatever. And,
Yeah.
and I didn't do a lot of that because I always wanted to be available
You,
for,
yeah.
when I could just like hang out with him.
Yeah, yeah. One of the big,
Um,
I was gonna say, one of the big mistakes I think that a lot of women make is kind of putting themselves because you're in this pursuit of this idea of what it is that you want, and so you're so interested in trying to make that happen that you kind of put some of the things that are important to you on the back burner because you're really running after this idea,
totally,
And
totally,
I can see, yeah, where you kind of look back and you're like, man, I wish I would have embraced the moment of enjoying where I was and what I could do rather than being so focused on this chase of what I wanted or thought I wanted and should
totally,
have.
totally, totally. And so then I just reached my breaking point where, like, even if he was, even if we were having like a quote unquote good, you know, day or good week, it still got to the point where it just wasn't enough. Like, I needed more for him. I needed more reassurance. I needed to know more of how he actually felt. And so I finally just brought it up to him and I was like, hey, like, I don't want to know what's going on here. I don't remember exactly what I said. It was quite a few years ago. And that's basically when he broke up with me. And he was just like, yeah, I think I'm just ready to move on. Like, I think I'm over it. He was
Yeah.
just so nonchalant about it. And I
Oh
was
my
like,
gosh.
wow, you asshole.
That was a heartbreak.
Um,
Yeah.
and I was just, completely, completely devastated. And so when, and I think at that point, maybe I'd already been seeing a counselor, but I was seeing this, like, I don't know how she described herself, but she was like a spiritual counselor.
Yeah.
And in my first few sessions with her, she was asking me a lot about my family life and growing up in my childhood. And this is my first experience at anything like coaching or therapy, or like, I had never ever done any of that stuff before. And
Right.
I didn't know anyone who had done that stuff before. And so she was asking me all the stuff about my family, my upbringing, and what
Yep.
was it like, and blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah, blah. And,
Yep.
and, and like, I was like, I don't know why she's asking me this. Like, my family life, you know,
It's like,
it
what does
was,
that
it
have
was
to do with what we're talking
like,
about? Yeah.
yeah, like, it was fine. And what I learned is, like, yeah, in a lot of ways, like, it was fine. Like, I always, had a roof over my head. There was never a question of whether or not there would be um, food on the table. My parents actually did end up getting divorced when I was an adult, but not as a kid. So had the family unit, all that kind of stuff. So I was thinking, like, people, like, why are we talking about this?
Right. Right. Right.
And then once we got a little bit more into it, we realized that emotions were shut down in my family. Like,
Yeah.
it was basically however my mom was feeling was how the rest of the family was
Yeah.
feeling, and we weren't allowed to share our emotions. We weren't allowed to be anything but good. And if we were being anything but bad, we were immediately put in, grounded or timeout when we were younger. And so there wasn't like a lot of emotional connection in our family. There was just a lot of, like, always being mad at each other, and then, like, nightly dinners um, together. It was like not a lot of, like, conversation. It was just like talking about logistics of, like, who needs their lunch made, who needs lunch money for the next day, who
Yeah.
needs to be
Yeah.
picked up where, and, like,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And so what working with her made me realize was, like, oh, like, I never learned how to,
Like how to
like,
connect
yeah, I
emotionally.
didn't
Yeah.
really learn how to yeah, I didn't really learn how to connect with people. And what I do remember is I remember my mom constantly being obsessed with her own body and losing weight. And I remember her always saying things about me and commenting on my body. And so the only thing that I had, I was like, okay, well, I think I can get approval from my mom and positive attention from my mom if I'm skinnier. And
Yeah.
so then that just, and again, I don't have that conscious awareness when I was little, but I had that, I created an unconscious belief, like, okay, I can get love through my looks. I can get love
Yes.
through
Right.
body and all that stuff. And so when you put it all together, then it's not surprising that I was attracting people who wanted friends with benefits or just wanted to have sex or whatever.
Right. Right. Right.
And I wasn't able to connect with anyone deeper. And so she really helped me to open my eyes to that. And then and so now something I met my husband like that next day. It was a lot of work, a lot of healing work to get through. But now I help women do the same things. Like, I don't really care if someone's online or not. I don't really care what their profile says. I don't really care, you know, what they're texting, or if they're waiting an hour or they're texting immediately back, or like, I don't care about any of that kind of stuff, because I think that stuff might make you like a really skilled dater, but at least for the women in my community, like, they want a relationship. They don't want to just be a really good dater.
Yeah.
And so, when I work with clients, like, I'm really focusing on the inner child work. I'm like, what were some of the things that you saw or were taught, either explicitly or implicitly growing up?
Right.
Because all of those things are going to create they're just going to create a lens in which
Uh-huh.
you see the world.
Yep.
And the lens can be, limiting or not, but for most of us, they're limiting. And so we
Yeah.
have to do the work to basically change the lens
Hmm.
that we're,
Been used
that
to
we're looking.
seeing, and yeah,
Yeah,
create a new lens. Yeah, yeah. I would,
totally.
yeah. That makes me, as I was listening to you and I'm thinking about your story and the body imaging, thinking that, if I just, because you really were not obese, like you weren't ever overweight, but it was just this thing in you, like you're thinking that if I just lost a little bit more weight, then maybe I will, have this relationship or whatever it is. And that kind of led you to transitioning the way that your eating habits too. Like you went through a lot of different transitions. I remember you
Yes.
talking about how you'd have headaches all the time, and then you just decided that you would go vegan. So there was a transition there. So all of those things kind of brought you to where you are today and meeting Stevie. Also, I can't forget to say that you worked for the Obama campaign once you left the Middle East and you came back here to the States. You started doing that, and I thought that was really interesting. Um,
Yeah, that was fun.
super
I,
fun, but it was very
I don't,
hard work, though.
yeah,
I think from
yeah,
what
I
I
don't
could
think
hear.
I'll ever work on a political campaign again. It's your life. It's not just like a job. It's your life. Yeah, actually, yeah, food and eating were actually a really important way that, or was a really important way that I eventually met my husband, because um, the food and the eating just manifested, or not even manifested, was a manifestation of the emotional, or the lack of emotional issues. No, the lack of emotion, or ability to share emotion that I had. And so, for me, like, how I thought that I could attract a certain guy or get a guy to go to the next level of seriousness by, like, sleeping with him or spending the night or making out or whatever, that's all about control, right? And so food is very much the same way. I can eat this many calories, I can burn this many calories every day, and then I can get my body to a certain size, and then that would give me that control of feeling good enough, of feeling loved, all
Yeah,
of those things that I wanted to feel.
right.
And so when I was on the Obama campaign, um, I mean, I was too many campaigns like this. I don't know what it's like now with quarantine, but when I was in the Obama campaign, I mean, he was work all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was expected to be online by 9 a.m. until 9 p.m., 7 days a week. And then once we got to the summer, like basically where we are now, and then early fall until the election, like, you're working way longer. Like, even
Yeah,
though you have to be online by 9 o'clock and you can't get offline until 9 p.m.,
right.
you have work to do before and after. And so you have to be, so it's like, I was probably working 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Long story short,
You guys
I
were
was
just
really, really,
eating
really,
anything. Like you guys
really,
were eating. Yeah. You guys
yeah,
were,
you just eat whatever
yeah.
you eat, whatever you get your hands on. And, a lot of the volunteers, bless them, were bringing us a lot of food, not the healthiest food in the
Right.
world,
Like pizza and
like pizza, a lot of pizza. Like, I was eating a lot of Subway, and there's also this really delicious burrito place in Wilmington that I would eat at too. Um, and so, yeah, you're eating garbage. And I remember towards the end of the campaign, like, I was just so tired. I'd be knocking on people's doors, and they would just be like laying around doing nothing. And
yeah.
so they would come into their door, and I would just like envy, like, just sit on the couch and like, it's
Right,
just
right.
like absolute freedom. Anyway, so I thought after the campaign, okay, I'm just gonna like hang out on the couch for a week. That's all I wanted to do, and then I'd be good. But the truth is that after the campaign, I was exhausted. And I
I
needed a
bet.
lot more than just one night or a few nights sleep to, just not feel like how I felt anymore. And I was just too tired to go back to eating how I did. I didn't feel like counting. I didn't feel like doing any of that crap.
Hmm.
And at the same time, I had these friends who, she was a vegan and she started this vegan blog. And like she posted her pictures and she just like, the food looked amazing. It looked like she loved eating it. She loved preparing it. She loved talking about it.
Right.
And I was like, I want that relationship with food. That looks fun. And
Yeah.
so I was like, all right, I'm gonna eat like Cheetos. I'm gonna be a vegan. And so I was a vegan and for a really long time. And that was really the catalyst of where I learned to not just eat and let it be a number, calories in, calories out, but eat and like let it be fun and nourishing to my body. Like I could just physically imagine like I was drinking this smoothie or I was eating this sandwich or whatever. And I could just imagine like this is nourishing like my
Yeah.
hair and my skin and my organs and all that kind of stuff.
You just felt better,
Now,
probably. Yeah.
yeah, and now I want to be clear, I'm not a vegan anymore. But just I was probably vegan for probably about a year and a half or so, and I basically stopped because I really miss sushi. I love
Hmm.
sushi.
Hmm.
Um, but basically, yeah, that's really what allowed me to um, just let go of some of this control and just, okay, if I feel like eating a bag of potato chips today, like that's what I'm going to do.
Hmm.
Because I know my body will naturally crave balance. My body's not going to crave to eat potato chips every single day. But um, if I shame myself and judge myself for eating potato chips, I'm going to feel crappy, and then I'm going to want to eat more potato chips.
Yeah.
I'm going to want to not feel crappy. And so, if I just allowed myself to eat whatever I wanted, that taught me to release control in food, and that also happened in other areas of my life where I was able just to show up, um, more fully as myself. And that's about when I met my husband.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And so it's funny because I'm thinking about when you met Stevie, and I was thinking about your story, and you were talking about how one day you guys were like out on a date or something, and he looked at you and he's like, "How did you get your skin so soft?" And you're like, "Kale."
Yeah, well, you should do research. That actually happened the first night that we met.
Yeah.
Um, he had just like very discreetly placed his hand on my knee. And he's like, "How's your skin so soft?" And actually, when he did that, I was like really embarrassed because like I hadn't like shaved my legs as because I wasn't expecting to meet anyone, and so I was like, "Oh God, oh God, oh God."
Right,
And then
right,
that's
right.
what he said, and I was like, "Oh, okay,
Okay, that was a
good."
relief. Yeah. So you're with Stevie. You guys are together, and things are great. It sounds like. And how long have you guys been married?
We have been married. It'll actually be 3 years next week. Well, next week at times of recording this. And then we've been together total of 7 years.
Wow, that's cool. Okay,
Yeah.
so you've experienced a lot. I mean, you're married now, and things are going good, but it's not perfect. You say it's not perfect. You know, you have ups and downs, and there are highs and lows. And so, how do you describe then? Because you have some really strong thoughts about marriage, and after you get married, the work that you have to do. So, why don't you just kind of share that with our listening audience right now? That's maybe thinking about being married like you one day and all of that. So, what are your thoughts? What's your best suggestions and thoughts?
Yeah. So what's interesting is, um, okay, so guilty pleasure. I like to watch The Bachelor and like all of the
Yes, yes,
adjacent
yes,
shows.
yes.
And last year after Bachelor in Paradise, one of the couples, I can't remember their name right now, or the names right now, like they had a very tumultuous relationship on the show, and for whatever reason decided to stay together. And then they come to the after the final rose thing, and they're just like trying to justify to themselves, relationships are hard. Well, they're hard. We're
Mm-hmm.
working through it. And and I'm like, yeah, relationships are hard because they involve two humans
Right.
um, balancing their needs and desires and goals. But then also, if you're like cohabitating, that even more complicates it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, relationships are hard in that sense, but it's not like the defining feature of a relationship. Do you know what I mean? Like, so, there have been times where Stevie and I have just been kind of fighting about stuff a lot, or just having to like work through like another growth phase in our relationship. But overall, like, it's a good relationship. And like, I, love talking to him and love hanging out with him and want to know what he thinks and want to go do stuff with him and all that kind of stuff. And so, but also like, it doesn't mean that it's free of having to do work to get there. Maybe that's
Right.
what the hard, quote unquote hard part is. I'm a big believer in like couples counseling or just taking like classes on relationships or doing things that allow you to connect together, not just like a cooking class, but like just some sort of like um, experience or class that
Yeah.
enhances your connection. Like, I had someone emailed me. She's on my email list, and she was emailing me to thank me for like all the information and all the stuff that I provide, like on my podcast and my newsletter and all that stuff. And she was like, she just wanted me to know that she had met someone and she was really grateful for me and that she was going to unsubscribe because she'd met someone, but she wanted me to know that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
she just wanted me to know that that's why she was unsubscribing.
Yeah.
And I emailed her, I emailed her back, but I was just like, this is like missing the whole point because unless I'm literally talking about online dating, everything that I teach when it comes to relationships and love applies whether you're dating and single or if you're in like a 20 plus year marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's there's a sense out there where it's like once you get into the relationship, like you're good. Or like you've quote
Right.
unquote conquered the game or whatever. And I'm like, okay, that's
No.
just like certainly one hurdle or not
Yeah.
hurdle, but just it's a milestone to be in a relationship or be married with someone for sure. But it doesn't mean that there's no more growth
I'm telling you.
to
Yes.
to be had. So yeah, it's like relationships do require work and sometimes that can be hard, but it's not the defining feature of a relationship. And if you're in a relationship that deep down doesn't feel good, but you're justifying to yourself or others that relationships are supposed to be hard. That probably means it's a little too hard and you might want to consider getting out.
Yeah. 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 All right. And it's funny too, because with you being a life coach, you kind of mentioned how Stevie's like, look, don't try to life coach me. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh my gosh.
that's always a bad idea. Like my clients who do this work, or I have some clients that are coaches. You definitely don't want to, give unsolicited advice or coach people, without their consent. Yeah, that's definitely a recipe for lots of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
fights.
So speaking of being a life coach, how long have you done this? And I want to move into your work now and what you do with women. So how long have you been doing this? And how would you describe, your philosophy of being a life coach? Like, how do you work with women?
Yeah, I have been doing this for 5 years, right? 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Well, this is my sixth year. So going on my sixth year. I guess it's been about 5.5 years. Um, and it's grown and transformed a lot as I've grown and transformed. And really over the past 3 years or so, I've really focused on doing the inner work with my clients. So I focused a lot on inner child work. So I, shared the story about what I learned about my own family growing up and how that influenced my beliefs about myself or how
Mm-hmm.
I got love.
Yeah.
That's really what I do with clients. It's not that I don't talk about the ins and outs of dating or profiles, ever. But, if a client were to send me like a text chain, like, okay, I was in this text chain with this person. What do you think I should say? I'm not going to be like, oh, well, you should say da 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 da, because that doesn't
Right.
actually help them beyond that moment. And plus, like, how do I know exactly what they should say? Like,
Right.
it's their life,
Yeah.
their situation. And so, what I would say instead is, I would say, okay, like, how does responding this way feel, or how did that text that he sent, how did that feel? Or if you're feeling triggered by this, what does that remind you of? And so we're always bringing it back to the inner work and specifically the inner child work.
Yeah.
Um, and that really allows my clients to learn how to relate to themselves in a whole new way. So that, when shit hits the fan or when they get rejected or things don't go the way they were hoping, they were going to go or whatever, they don't fall into victim mode or self pity
Mm-hmm.
or, limiting beliefs or whatever. It's more of like, okay, this sucks. How can I work through this? How can I,
Yeah.
heal? How can I grow from it? All of those things. So that's really what I do,
Sounds good.
with my clients in a nutshell.
Yeah, yeah, sounds good. And you have some, I want to get into the methods that you use. So you have, of course, individual and you have group coaching. And then you have a boot camp and something else interesting, the Date Yourself Challenge. So
Yeah.
how does all this work? Yeah.
So I run the Date Yourself Challenge once a year around Valentine's Day, every year. So just had it about 3 months ago. We'll do it again, most likely next year. And then I actually don't have the boot camp anymore. That's an old program. So I do mostly one-on-one coaching with women, and then once a year I do my Love Incubator group, which is a small group coaching program. And then I have a course that's available year-round called Crappy to Happy,
Mm-hmm.
and that takes people through my exact step-by-step process. I take my clients through to clear whatever blocks or limiting beliefs are standing in their way in their love life.
Okay.
And that includes a one-on-one session too. So
And so,
you get some, time with me so I can help you troubleshoot.
yeah. So what's the duration of time like when you do your coaching sessions if you're doing individual or if you're doing group? Like how long do you do your groups or your individual sessions? Are they like, well, it's typically a client should come about 12 times before they're finished or, is there a specific duration?
Yeah, I work with my clients usually from about 4 to 6 months. And it totally just depends on the client. Sometimes we get to the end of our time frame together, which again is about 4 to 6 months, and they feel good. Like they feel like they're ready to go out and you know pursue relationships without feeling like they need me. Sometimes they want me in their back pocket just in case,
Yeah.
and so then I'll give them. I have a special alumni package where they can just buy a certain number of sessions, and it's not like the whole package that they did for the first 4 to 6 months. You just use these sessions as needed until the time is used up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what probably most of my private clients do. My Love Incubator is also 6 months long. I think 6 months is definitely, I mean, ideally, I would love to work with clients for a year. However, I also know that a year can feel like a really long commitment. If
Yeah.
you never worked with someone before, you're like, I don't know, like, I don't know if you can do
Right,
a year.
right, right, right.
So I think, breaking up a little shorter time, if client needs to work a little bit longer, then, we might just, re-up the package. And, it's really just based on where the client was before they came to me and also what's going on in their life.
Okay.
Um, and then the Crappy to Happy program, that's actually a fairly quick program. It takes about 2 weeks to get through if you have lifetime access to it. But like if you were to follow it, as the new lessons were dropped every 2 days, then it would take you 2 weeks to get through it. I would not say that you would be magically healed in 2 weeks, but it certainly takes 2 weeks to learn the steps, and then you just go back and you use the steps and
All right.
reapply them as necessary.
Great.
But I do think that when I know a lot of women who are really frustrated in love and just feel like they're not attracting anyone or they only attract assholes or like whatever it is, it can feel so far away to get where you want to go. And I know that feeling. But I also really believe that this also doesn't have to take forever. I'm not saying it's an overnight process. It's definitely not, but it's not like years and years and years of like therapy that you have to do.
Right.
If you're really focused and zeroed in on the exact work that you need to do,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think things can actually move fairly quick,
That's good.
quicker than one might assume.
Okay. So you obviously you can do this virtually. You don't have to have someone in your office to do this. So you probably have clients all over the country, maybe even
All
all
over the
over the
world,
world.
really. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, I was gonna say even all
yeah,
over the world, and they can just call you. Maybe you meet them via Zoom. Is that correct, or something like that? Is that how you kind of do it? Or
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
As well
good,
as
good.
well as via Zoom.
Okay. All right. And so, how do people sign up? Just go to your website, and I know you've kind of got this like survey or maybe a little test or something that people take and that kind of thing? I've looked at your website. So how do they
Yeah,
sign
so
up?
I have a couple of resources that would be great next steps for your listeners. One, I have a dating block quiz. So if you want to know or just get understanding of what's blocking you in love, you can go to veronicagrant.com/quiz. And yeah, you take a quick little quiz. And then depending on what your block is, you'll actually get um, just some information on how to clear that specific block. And then if you want to learn more about doing inner child work and more about how to clear your blocks, then I have a workshop that takes you through the 5 steps to do that. So you can get that at veronicagrant.com/workshop. And both of those resources are totally free.
All right. And before we go, I noticed on your website that you have a lot of testimonials, like really, really cute and neat testimonials of people that have had success as a result of your program. Like I've seen people are married, getting married, and everything.
Yeah.
So can you just tell a real quick, but just a little testimonial of somebody like how this all happened for them before we go?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's funny when we actually just as we were talking, um, on my phone, and I got a text from an old client, and she literally has just gone into labor
Oh, wow.
um, with someone that she met while we were working together. Um, and then we continued working together, and I helped her to kind of work through some of the kinks in the relationship because there's, like I said, relationships take work. There's some growing pains for sure, and so I supported her through that process. And
Neat.
and she just texted me. She's like, "I'm at the hospital, I'm about to go into labor."
Wow. That is so neat.
so so yeah, that's pretty fun.
Awesome.
And one of the resources I want to share with your audience is since I assume people listening to this are also podcast listeners. I have a podcast as well
Yep.
called The Love Life Connection, and I actually coach women on the show. So if you want to get an idea of like what clearing love blocks looks like, in
Yeah.
coaching, or how inner child work, looks like, then
I can hear that. Okay.
it would be a great show to listen to for
All
that.
right. So before we go, once again, go ahead and give veronicagrant.com, is it right? And maybe your Instagram or how they can reach you.
Yeah. So all the links, veronicagrant.com/quiz. It's a quiz. veronicagrant.com/workshop is the workshop I talked about for inner child work. And then my podcast is The Love Life Connection, and you can search that wherever you listen, or just go to veronicagrant.com/podcast.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Veronica. Thank you again for being on the show. And thank you, listeners. I just want to remind you, don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, or comment on the shows that can be heard on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Thanks so much for listening to the Lovers Lounge podcast, where we talk to experts and other guests on topics related to love, relationships, and sex. I'm, of course, your host, Tina Love. And until next time, peace. And don't you forget,